Okay, so learned the last couple of months about the essence of the Jewish people, fundamentals of Judaism has many components, and we're still focusing on the essence of the Jewish people. What we've learned so far was about the meaning of what a Jew is, and how a Jew is a part of Hashem. And in this discussion, we learned about the different contributions that Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob gave to every Jew. We learned how not only is the neshama, the soul, in essence, it's a part of Hashem, but also that through the circumcision that Hashem commanded Abraham to have, the Jewishness, the godliness of the Jew is also part of his body. And this was enhanced through Yitzchak, who was circumcised at 8 days old, which we explained in the previous classes how that's something beyond Abraham. Because if you are committing yourself to connect to Hashem because of your understanding and your feeling, so it's limited, it's artificial, it's based upon you. And although Avraham Avinu, his connection to Hashem was because of, as we learned, the very first thing God told Avram, the Torah records, is God's commandment to Avram to leave his land, not Avram's own achievements, his own devotion to Hashem, but the commandment of Hashem to Avram was the first thing the Torah records, because that highlights that his connection to Hashem wasn't man-based, but rather was because of God. That denotes the unique spiritual nature of a Jew, that a Jew's connection to Hashem is because of godliness, not because of his own understanding and feelings. But still, since externally his circumcision was at an advanced age, it doesn't express the bond that Yitzchak's connection to Hashem does, because Yitzchak is circumcised at the age of 8 days, which obviously at the age of 8 days there's no such thing as understanding and feeling, and it's purely and obviously a godly connection. And the Yaakov further, his connection to Hashem is even greater in a way than Yitzchak, because he was fathered by someone who was circumcised at the age of 8 days old. And that's what we learned last time, how Yitzchak and Avram, although they were completely Jewish, yet they were able to father someone who wasn't Jewish. While Yaakov, not only is he Jewish, but all of his children are holy and tzaddikim. And this is because the godly soul of Yaakov was one with his body in a way that surpassed Avram and Yitzchak. And that's why Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are all called our forefathers. They all contribute uniquely to our holiness, to our Jewishness, to our godliness, so that our soul is our very identity. But beyond the holiness and godliness that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov give to every Jew, there's also a unique quality that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov give to us respectively. Each of them has a unique way of serving Hashem. Avram's service of Hashem was associated with love and kindness. Yitzchak's service of Hashem was associated with fear and awe and reverence. And Yaakov is called the attribute of truth. The Zohar differentiates between Moshe Rabbeinu and Yaakov Milgav, and Yaakov Milbar, and Moshe Milgav, that within the truth itself there's different levels, but in general, Yaakov's attribute is Tiferes, beauty, which is connected to a composition of the attribute of Avram and the attribute of Yitzchak. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov contains in him both Ava, both love, and reverence, both Chesed and Gvura. And that's why his attribute is called beauty, because beauty is created by color. So because Yaakov has both attributes within him, that's why he's called Tiferes, and that's why he is also called the attribute of truth, as we'll get to Mitzvah Hashem. So the stories the Torah tells us about Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, although they all happen physically, but as the Shalah says, the Shalah says the real subject matter of the Torah is in the spiritual realms, and it merely hints to the physical realms. The physical expression of Torah is not the real subject matter of Torah. The real subject matter of Torah is in spiritual realms. The Torah talks about the spiritual. It merely alludes to the physical reality that emerges from the spiritual story. So, for example, Avram, there are many examples throughout the Torah. Every story of our forefathers is about their spiritual journey. For example, it says about Avram traveling to the south, and Chassidus says that because the sun rises in the east, so the top of the compass is the east, and that's the highest sphera, the sphere of Chachma. And if you're traveling, if you're facing east, so the south is on your right, and right in general is associated with the attribute of kindness. So therefore, the south, Avram traveling to the south, means Avram was ascending higher and higher in his love of Hashem until, as the Alter Rebbe writes, he became a chariot. He embodied love and kindness in his physical body. He was a chariot to God's love. He expressed God's love in this world. So all the stories we read in the Torah about Yitzchak digging wells and Yaakov at his father-in-law's house with the peeling the sticks, all of this is about really their spiritual service to Hashem. But we're not going to go through everything, but let's focus instead on the three temples. Three temples correspond to Av, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Let's see how the three temples express their unique spirituality. The first temple, Avram; the second temple, Yitzchak; and the third temple, Yaakov. And God willing, in the future shiurim we'll learn about the contribution of the giving of the Torah, and how the giving of Torah also made a new dimension in our bond with Hashem. But let's focus now on the three temples. It says in the Gemara that the second temple was greater than the first temple in its size and its size and its amount of time that it endured, the amount of time that it lived, that existed. The first temple was 30 amas high, and the second temple was 100 amas high. But obviously, if we're talking about the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, we're not just talking about space and time, as in the language of the Gemara is, greater is the glory of the second Beis Hamikdash. That has a greater glory than the first Beis Hamikdash. So it's not just that it lasted longer, or that it was taller. Rather, it's the reason it was taller and the reason it lasted longer is because that expresses its unique spiritual characteristic. So we need to understand what exactly is the unique characteristic of the second temple.
The main thing is the physical, though.
The main thing
seems to be.
Well,
I mean, the greatness of it, the size of it means that there was more people able to physically be there.
But it's a Beis Hamikdash. It's a holy place. What's its essence about? It's about holiness. It's about kedusha.
The physical realms to serve people in physicality.
So the specific.
Obviously, it has to be.
So on the other hand, if you look in the Gemara Yuma and Daf Chaf Aleph, it says that the first Beis Hamikdash was greater than the second Beis Hamikdash. It says the second Beis Hamikdash was missing 5 things. They didn't have the fire coming from heaven. They didn't have the ark. They didn't have the Urim V'Tumim. They didn't have Ruach HaKodesh. So the first Beis Hamikdash, it seems, is a lot holier than the second Beis Hamikdash. So why does the Gemara say that the glory, which the glory seems to be the main element of the Beis Hamikdash is for sure its holiness? It's not. We're not into the real estate of it. So why are we saying the second is greater? So to understand this, let's look at the different attributes of Avram and Yitzchak and how this is mirrored in these two temples. The service of Avram Avinu, as we say in the prayer for rain, remember our father who was drawn after you like water. The connection between Avram Avinu and Hashem is compared to water. Yitzchak, on the other hand, his service to Hashem with fear and reverence is compared to fire. The difference between fire and water is that water descends from above to below. Water is affected by gravity and goes downwards, And Yitzchak, his nature is fire, his service of Hashem is about ascending upwards. The Chassidus gives an analogy to explain these two different kinds of connections to Hashem, with water, with fire. Example Chassidus gives is of a teacher and a student. You could have a teacher who gives a student a brilliant explanations in the Talmud. He teaches him his Pilpulim. The teacher is gifted, he's the Rogatchover going. The teacher is the Rogatchover. And he teaches the student these insights that only the Rogatchover could say. And the student is able to retain this information. He's able to remember what the Rogatchover said. And he's able to give over to others the teachings of the Rogatchover going. You can imagine this student is giving over the brilliant teachings of the Rogatchover. On the other hand, the Rogatchover doesn't teach him how to study. He just teaches him the information that he discovered in his studies. He doesn't teach him the method of Torah learning. And really, it would be impossible to teach a regular student the method of learning the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover has the entire Torah at his fingertips. Just one example that just brings out who the Rogatchover is in this Torah portion. The Rogatchover says that the argument in the Talmud about Ishor Muad, about whether an ox is how responsible is the owner for the damages that his ox does. So the Gemara says the Torah says that if the ox gores 3 times, then you're responsible for a full 100% of the damages. But until then, that point, you're only responsible for half of the damages. So the Gemara brings a discussion about whether you're liable after 3 times or 4 times, and the Rogatchover explains that the argument about the Chazaka and about Sharmuad is about the definition of the 4 elements in creation. Are there 4 elements that created in creation, or is the element of water include the element of earth, or do we count all 4 elements as 4 elements: fire, water, wind, and earth? And he somehow sees in this argument between the definition of the ox scoring 3 times or 4 times, how this is connected to the 4 elements in creation. So the student of the Rogatchover, who is able to retain information but is not able to invent Torah insights like the Rogatchover, he has a lot of information. But then there's another kind of teacher who doesn't just give the student insights that he has. He teaches the student how to learn. He teaches the student how to approach the Talmud. So in the student's insights, as a result of this teacher's work, he is able to have his own insights. He is changed. The first student hasn't developed any connection to the Talmud, hasn't developed his own method of learning. He's just hearing what the Rogatchover is saying. Once the Rogatchover stops teaching him, he has nothing to contribute of his own. He doesn't know how to approach the Gemara. The second student, while his insights are his own, but compare them to the first student's insights, they're negligible. They're not considered insights at all compared to the insights of the Rogatchover. So if you're talking about the level of the idea is certainly higher in the first student's ideas. His ideas are a lot greater. We're talking about the level of the student who's able to approach the Gemara on his own, although albeit not as great insights as the Rogatchover, as his teacher, but still whatever he's able to do, it's his own. He's able to learn the Talmud himself. As the saying goes, give a man a piece of fish, he has fish for a day. Teach a man a fish, he has fish for life. Whatever he has, he's able to continue on and to develop Torah insights on his own. So this is the difference between water and fire. Water descends from above to below, and fire ascends upwards. Water is about how something is given to you from heaven that's not your own, and doesn't necessarily affect you at all. Fire, on the other hand, descends from below to above. Fire represents how there's a change, that something's happening here, and there's something in this world that's ascending, going upwards towards spirituality. Let's look at the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos comparing Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. The Gemara says like this: if you were to weigh all of the Torah scholars on a scale, all the Chachmei Yisrael on a scale, and you would weigh them against Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, he would outweigh them all. He would be greater than all the Torah scholars, period. However, if you took the same Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus and all the Torah scholars together, and you would weigh them against Rebbe Eliezer ben Aruch, Rebbe ben Aruch would outweigh them all. He is greater than all of them together, including Rebbe Eliezer ben Hurkanus. So the commentaries on the Mishnah say that the first statement of the Mishnah was including Rebbe Eliezer ben Aruch. In other words, Rebbe Eliezer ben Aruch and all of the sages of Israel are also outweighed by Eliezer ben Hurkanus. Eliezer ben Hurkanus outweighs all the sages of Israel, including Rebbe Eliezer ben Aruch, and Rebbe Eliezer ben Aruch outweighs all the sages of Israel, including Rebbe Eliezer ben Hurkanus. How could they both be true? So it depends on what you're talking about. The unique quality of Eliezer ben Hurkanus is that he was called, the Gemara says, Bar Sushin Mabetipa. He was somebody who was like a cistern that did not lose a drop of water. He was able to retain all the insights of Torah of his teachers. So his virtue is water. His virtue is he's receiving the amazing insights of the teachers before him. He has a lot more insight in Torah that he could share than anybody else because he's received from the teachers of before. On the other hand, what's the unique quality of Eliezer ben Aruch? His Torah, his achievement was he was Mainim as Gaber. He was able to invent his own Torah insights. So you're talking about the person. Eliezer ben Aruch is greater. He has a greater ability to understand Torah. Talking about the ideas of Torah that were shared, Eliezer ben Hurkanus is greater. He has a lot greater insights because he is not just sharing his own; he's sharing the insights of his teachers. So in a similar way, the first Beis Hamikdash was a revelation of godliness, which was much higher than the second Beis Hamikdash. And that's why there was 5 things the first Beis Hamikdash had, the second didn't. It had the Urim V'Tumim, it had the fire coming from heaven, it had the Aron, it had the Ruach HaKodesh. There was a revelation of godliness that far surpassed whatever happened in the second Beis Hamikdash. On the other hand, all this revelation, all of this holiness that the first Beis Hamikdash had was all because Hashem was revealing himself. It wasn't about the world being elevated. And since it wasn't about the world being elevated, so factually, physically, the first Beis Hamikdash didn't last as long as the second Beis Hamikdash, and it also wasn't as big as the second Beis Hamikdash. These physical properties of the second Beis Hamikdash, that it lasted longer and that it was physically bigger, they express how the second Beis Hamikdash was the Jewish people. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. The second Beis
Hamikdash also had more Torah. With the Zohar, it was much. So there was more revelation, but there was more challenges.
Oh, that's true. I think I shared the story with you about Reb Chaim Gudnik. Reb Chaim Gudnik, he was once speaking to the Rebbe about. He came from he didn't come from Chabad background. He studied in Telz, and he was sharing with the Rebbe about different complaints he heard from his friends about the Rebbe's Tefillin campaign, other mitzvah campaigns. And he was wondering why there's such an opposition to the Rebbe's campaigns. So Rebbe spoke to him about the first Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash. The Rebbe said the first Beis Hamikdash, although it was not holier than the second Beis Hamikdash, yet the sins that were done in the first Beis Hamikdash were a lot greater than the sins done in the second Beis Hamikdash. The first Beis Hamikdash, the Gemara says they were guilty of all the 3 cardinal sins of idolatry, adultery, and murder. The second Beis Hamikdash was a subtle sin of senseless hatred. So, Rebbe said that the reason why the first Beis Hamikdash had more challenges is because of 2 things. The reason number 1 is because Hashem made the world in a way that Zel Umazeh, that Kedusha and Klippa mirror each other. So wherever there's more holiness, there's also going to be, Hashem makes the world, makes it fair, so we have free choice. So if there's more holiness in the world, there's also going to be more of the opposite. And also the Rebbe said that when Klippa, when the evil force of Yetzer Hara, the Satan, the Klippa Sitra Achra, when it sees that it's going to be destroyed, it uses every dirty trick in the book. So because the first temple had more revelation, because of that, that's why there was more of a attraction to the opposite. The second Beis Hamikdash, because it didn't have such revelation, it wasn't as great of a Yetzer Hara, it wasn't as forceful. Maybe you could use the word passive aggressive. The second Yetzer Hara, second Beis Hamikdash with a senseless hatred, and the first one was more openly aggressive. I don't know, but either way, the Rebbe said to him that the Tefillin campaign, the Mezuzah campaign, all these campaigns, they bring to the world such an incredible godly revelation that is unprecedented. And because of this, the force of Klippa, the force of the opposite of holiness, uses every dirty trick of the book to stop it. And that's why the Rebbe says there are religious Jews who are coming out against the Tefillin campaign. How does it make sense? If you're religious, you put on Tefillin. You have mezuzah, you like Shabbos candles. And here someone's coming and he's helping another Jew who doesn't know about it and helping them put on Tefillin. Why would anyone be against it? It's ridiculous. But the reason why there's such an opposition is because there's such a revelation of godliness. He also shared with the Rebbe that one of the reasons that his friends are saying that this is wrong is because it's something that if you're going to do outreach, it could bring you down. Your connection to the people around you could bring you down. So the Rebbe said that the Torah says about the frogs that when the frogs were enveloping Egypt, they were everywhere. They were in the courtyards, they were in the palaces, and they were in the ovens. But when the Torah says that the frogs died, it says the frogs died everywhere in the palaces and the courtyards, but it doesn't say the frogs in the ovens died. And the reason it doesn't say the frogs in the ovens died is because the frogs in the ovens didn't die. Why didn't the frogs that were in the ovens preserved? Why did they remain alive? So it says that frogs are naturally cold-blooded, and their jumping into the ovens is something which is completely against their nature, not something that they can naturally do. And therefore, in order for them to have that kind of, in order for them to do this, they have to have sacrifice. And because they had sacrifice, they're protected. In a similar way, the Rebbe said that when I send a shliach, when I send someone to share Judaism, that person is going to cool off the ovens of Egypt. He's going into the world where there's a lot of heat and the opposite of holiness, the ovens of Egypt, and that the ovens of Egypt will not be able to hurt him. On the contrary, the Rebbe said it will not hurt him, not in this world, not in the next world. Anyway, so similar, on another occasion, the Rebbe spoke about how the similar concept, how the Gentile sages challenged Rabbi Shimon Hanania. They asked him all kinds of questions about the Torah, and they asked him, who should we speak to once you die? And he told them, once I die, you won't have such good questions. Why won't they have such good questions? Because again, Klippa, the opposite of holiness, what challenges Torah, what the darkness in the world is made to fit the light that Hashem gives to the world. So the first base of English did have more of opposition. However, if we're talking about the revelation of godliness, the first base of English had a greater revelation. It's like Avram, it's like water, it's revelation from above to below. Then the Jewish people did tshuva after the sins of the exile, the 70 years of exile Babylonia, and they rebuilt the second temple. They're doing tshuva, and rebuilding the second temple represents an elevation from below to above, like fire, where their connection to godliness is because of their purity and their attachment to Hashem. So on the one hand, you can't compare the revelation of the first to the second temple. The first temple is much greater. On the other hand, the advantage of the second temple is that it elevates the world itself. That's the advantage of Yitzchak. That's the meaning of, which Hashem, as we'll see, God willing, next classes about how this is mirrored the life of Abraham, the life of Yitzchak. But in short, Yitzchak is about elevation from below to above. Yitzchak was one who digs the wells and discovers and reveals the godliness within creation. It's about not about water coming from above to below, but about fire, about revealing what's there in the world and elevating the world. And that's why the second base of Mikdash was physically bigger and it lasted longer. Well, what's the point of it being physically bigger or lasting longer? Just like we said before about the students, that when the student is taught by a teacher and the teacher just gives him his information, so the student is left without any ability to approach the Gemara, but he has these amazing ideas. That's like the first temple. There's a huge revelation, but doesn't affect the student, doesn't affect the world. The world is just the way it was before. The second student, who is taught by his teacher how to approach Gemara, yes, he cannot invent the teachings of the Rogachover. He's not in that realm. However, whatever he invents in the Torah is his own insight. So to the second temple, it was about the world being elevated. And that's why the second temple lasted longer and it was bigger in time and space. That represents how the second temple was about the world being elevated towards spirituality. It wasn't about the Hashem superimposing revelation upon the world. It was about the world being elevated to Kedusha. Mirza Hashem, God willing, next time we'll learn about Yaakov and about what the unique contribution the giving of the Torah has on the Jewish people. But in short, what we learned today is how the first and second temple correspond to Avram and Yitzchak. Avram is the attribute of water, Yitzchak is the attribute of fire. And that's why the first temple was about revelation, a higher revelation. And the second temple was compared to fire, about not a high revelation, but the world being more of a vessel for holiness. That's why it lasted longer and it was physically bigger. Any questions or comments?
No, shkoyach.
Shkoyach, have a great day, Reb Zev.
I figured out why I didn't meet you yesterday, and my alarm went off at 3:45 in the morning.